Welcome to the Accelerating Operational Performance podcast. I'm Greg Schenkel, President of Unique Training and Development and Frontline Leadership Systems. And you know that our mandate is always to help you both on your career journey, but also to execute better at work on the projects that you're doing and do so with less stress. And this episode is a second part because our guest, Edwin Holder, or Ed Holder, is joining us. And if you were listening to part one, Ed took us through a lot of his early years and how he went through his business career. And where we left it in part one is really where Ed is running for politics, this time successfully. And so I'm really curious to hear from Ed in this episode the lessons that he took from being in the business world and the new lessons learned in the political world and how that all kind of mashed up. So if you want more of Ed Holder's background, just realize he did run a very large regional insurance brokerage called Stevenson and Hunt in the London area. He ran successfully for federal politics with the Conservative Party, first as always under the Stephen Harper as Prime Minister, but then became the Minister of Science and Technology. I know I've missed a word there, but and then of course became Mayor of the City of London, Ontario, which is a fairly sizable municipality. So welcome back to part two of the podcast, Ed.
Nice to see you again, Greg.
So where we were leaving things at the first episode was really. You had to run for the nomination again, and you were running, did you say that you're running against Wayne Gretzky, the famous hockey player, Wayne Gretzky's uncle?
That's right.
All right. So, what was his name again?
Al
Gretzky. So you're running for the nomination, and again, people are probably very comfortable in both the U.S. and Canada knowing that you run in the primaries or you get the nomination first, that you're going to represent your riding in the party. You're going to represent your party first, that you're going to be the person, and then comes the election. So help us understand first, maybe I'd be curious to know, what was maybe the most surprising? I'm sure there was just a lot about politics that you knew to some degree, but you probably didn't know as well as you did when you got the nomination and started to run. I'm just curious what one of the surprising elements, and you can obviously enlighten the story with, what was it like to run for politics, especially federal politics?
Well, I'd run once before in 1992, not so successfully. I told you in the prior segment that I'd run for class president and lost that as well. Yeah. So I'm pretty good at losing.
Yeah. Which is great to know that even after losing, you didn't just say to heck with it. You decided to do it again. Because some people just say once they failed once, I'm not going again. But you obviously decided to do it again.
Well, in 1993, when I ran and did not win, I thought I was done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because usually a candidate is somewhat discarded, right? There's almost this sense of, well, that person didn't win, so we wouldn't run them again.
Well, it's not so much the party as even the individual. Often in politics, you're allowed to lose twice before you're forever banned, as they say. Yeah. But I had other things to occupy me, so I had my insurance business. After 1993, I had my community service, I had my family, all of that together. So that really had some pretty significant impact. So what was interesting was that one of the things that really compelled me to keep going in community was the Business Cares Food Drive. Mm-hmm. So I'd started that with a friend of mine, John Kidner, and we did it for a few years until about 1993. Yeah. I beg your pardon. We started in about 1993 when I'd run for the election. And in 1996, a couple of dramatic things happened. John Kidner, he passed away. So I had no soul to help me carry on. But more significantly, to me at least, my son passed away.
Yeah, I wasn't sure that we were going to bring that up, but that must have just been absolutely devastating.
There's nothing more dramatic, more impactful in your life for all your family, my wife, myself, my daughter. And so we took a year off everything. So no more Business Cares Food Drive, I stepped away from Rotary, I stepped away from all my involvements. I just needed time to start a healing process going.
For sure.
And because Bruno was just that kind of a kid, he was you don't want to bring them into sainthood, but this kid was pretty special.
Yeah.
All kids are,
Yeah.
but this kid was, when we used to teach him to skate, he couldn't skate.
Yeah.
In fact, he, just to give you an idea of his character, we got him into hockey late at life. Late as in 8 years old is late for a kid. So my accountant, Von Miner, lent me his son's shoulder pads and knee pads. The knee pads were too small, shoulder pads were too big, socks didn't match, but he had skates and a helmet.
Yeah.
And the only thing common was the game shirt, because when we went thinking his first effort was going to be a practice, turns out to be a game.
Oh.
So that's how disorganized I was.
Yeah.
And the next time was a practice, and then after the practice, the coach comes up and said, "Mr. Holder, I think we need to send him down a level because he can't skate."
Yeah.
And I didn't know, but Bruno had come up and he was tugging on my jacket, and he said, "Don't let them send me down. I can't let my mates down." And that was his sense of loyalty.
Wow.
And he got the SO Most Improved because I made him do power skating, but he was quite anxious to do that.
Yeah. Wanted to improve. Yeah.
And
the commitment was there.
And every year after that, he was either captain or assistant captain, depending on whether the coach had a kid on the team.
That's not easy. So again, for our American listeners especially, probably like baseball or football is in the U.S. or even basketball, it's like in Canada, like you're usually, if you're a kid, you're 4 or 5 years old, you're starting skating, sometimes even as 3 years old. And then so to be 8 years old and not even know how to do the basics of that, just that commitment to eventually become the captain of the team
So if you can imagine Greg at age 14, and we lost him in December '96, and his very last game, and he was leading his league in points. In fact, there's a trophy at White Oaks Arena.
Stronach Arena?
No.
Oh, no, White Oaks Arena.
But it's the one at Southdale and White Oak Road. And
we're getting really hyper local here, everybody.
Yeah.
Because but I think my kids played at the same arena.
But the interesting thing is there's a massive trophy sponsored by the Directors Club.
Oh, okay.
And it was given to the kid who had the 3 C's: coachability, character, and commitment.
Coachability, character, and commitment. There's a few takeaways for our podcast listeners.
So he got that. Well, he didn't get that. They named it after him. Yeah. And then, so really coming back to after that, I just took time, and my wife took time. She lost her business that she had up in Stratford. And it was just the most horrible year in the world.
That sounds like it's probably the lowest point
in your life.
In your life, in the family's life.
All of us.
And it rocks everybody. So definitely understand the stepping back and the healing part. So then what is it that reignited, the desire to do things after that then?
My Cape Breton mom always used to say, if you don't take steps forward, you die. If you stop, you die. So don't stop.
Yeah.
And she was a great anchor for that.
Yeah.
And you know what? At some point, you got to stand up again.
Yeah.
And so what reconnected me to the Business Cares food drive back in 1999 was Glenn Pearson, a great
Glenn
humanitarian.
Pearson, a very strong community-minded person even today, along with his wife, runs the London...
Jane,
runs the London Food Bank.
Yeah, they have for nigh on 40 years.
And he himself served as a Liberal politician at the federal level.
At the same time, boy, did we work well together.
Neat.
Because it wasn't about picking sides.
Yeah.
We didn't have the partisanship, nor would I allow it to happen, nor would he.
Yeah, we're going to get into the partisanship because, of course, anybody in either country knows how easy it is for the sides to really sling mud at one another. Yep. But at the local level, you're both trying to get stuff for the city of London and for the people of London. And then you said that really set the stage later to become a minister, because when you're the minister, like a cabinet member in the U.S. government, you have more constituents. So you're still playing a bit of partisanship, but you're really looking out for the people because your portfolio is really to bring good to Canada, for example. So, so you have this relationship with Glenn Pearson. So he's helping you with the Business Cares food drive.
Well, actually, he came back and asked if I would start it over again. And with John gone, and I guess needing to get my head back in the game. And there's an old gentleman, Matt Cuddy. I don't know if you know Cuddy Farms.
Again, Cuddy's, again, for people who wouldn't know the Cuddy family, very big in chicken when McDonald's
Turkeys,
launched
and turkeys,
and turkeys. And when McDonald's launched the Chicken McNuggets, Cuddy Foods was a big supplier there, grew famously and fabulously, big family business. And Matt Cuddy was kind of like the scion, I guess, of the family.
So he phoned me up one day, and it was about a year after we'd lost Bruno. And he said, Ed, it's Mac, what are you doing? I said, Mac, I'm not doing much. And he said, I hear that. He said, what about for the community? I said, even less. He said, I hear that too. That's not good. And Mac was a bit of a rough and gruff kind of guy. And he said, the community needs you back in the game. And he said, he said, you need to join the convention center. I said, why do I need to do that?
The board of the convention center?
Yeah. And he said, because it needs that leadership. My son was the very first president or chairman of the convention center, and there's an opportunity. I said, I don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. He said, great. John Keim's going to call you in a few minutes, and he'll explain the process. I said, Mac, he hangs up. Keim calls me up 2 minutes later and said, Ed, I understand you're interested in joining the convention center board. I said, actually, I'm not. He said, Mac said you'd say that. Yeah. But he said, they need you, da-da-da-da. So I said, but it's a political process. And he said, no, we've taken care of that.
Yeah. By the way, I want to pause here for a minute because we've heard this from other guests that we've had on the podcast that, and I've asked this even in our frontline leadership program. I've asked like this, and these are usually supervisors who are in these programs. I said, how many of you like voluntarily wanted to put your name forward versus how many of you were told by some other manager that you were definitely going to put your name in to be a supervisor or team leader? And I think it would be roughly about a third of people do it because somebody else tells them to do it and doesn't really make it sound like they even have an option. And I think that we lose the fact that if everyone waited till they had all the stars align and the angels sing about going and doing something, things just wouldn't happen. And Ed's a good example as our guest today, is saying yes to things. And even if those things didn't turn out, like it's just something that just, again, became part of the leadership journey of the Tapestry. So anyway, you do capitulate, I guess, to the pressures that be, and you end
Got
up
on the board, became chair of the board a year later.
Of course you did.
Yeah, of course I did. Yeah. Because, there haven't been too many organizations, and I've been involved in about 40 charities in this community. And there aren't too many that I haven't led or had a senior role. Yeah. And that's, and you know what it means in London? When you're in a community group, if you miss a meeting, you become the president. But
I think that's what happened to me as well. Actually, like you, I usually end up running it, mostly because, I think and communicate well, but it's like, it's not a curse because that's like a humble brag, but it's like, people are looking for people who are willing to step into what can be a very messy situation. There's a lot of personalities. I always say organizations, I'm not sure whether you'd agree with this, organizations when you're a member have a different view than when you're closer to where the decisions are made behind the scenes. And somebody actually said this, that organizations, even the best run, most well-meaning organizations can look quite ugly sometimes when you get into the nastiness that sometimes is there at the core. And so I know in some cases my experience was different being the leader of it than being sort of just a member of it. And I don't know whether you ever had that sense or whether you just buckled down and did whatever it was needed.
Well, a bit of both, I suppose. But I look at it, and I think a leader's role is to lead.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say to folks in general, when you're asked to do something or consider something, just say yes, because you never know where that opportunity is going to take you. And I've said yes a lot more times than I've ever said no.
Yeah.
And
which probably meant at times you were overcommitted.
Oh, are you kidding me? Insanely so.
Yeah. I guess we haven't really talked about this. Like when you do say yes too much, and many people, as you know, there's a whole sort of countermeasure to that, which is learn to say no to certain things so that you protect yourself a bit. I'm guessing by saying yes so much and getting overwhelmed at times, that also made you maybe better at leading or delegating or
time management, delegation.
Yeah.
I'm a great delegator.
Yeah.
Because firstly, I don't have the talent.
Right.
So the advantage I've got is that by asking people who are smarter than me, which by the way in most organizations is most of them, means that you get the best out of them, but you get people involved and committed. Yeah. I'm going to come back to a stat you gave. You said maybe about a third of folks are told to join.
Yeah.
I think it's more than that.
Yeah, probably.
And why are people compelled to join? Because I would go to you and say, listen, I'm doing this project here with the Veterans Monument in Springbank Park. Would love to be part of it. And you'd say, tell me more.
Yeah.
But the fact that I've made the ask of you for that, which I haven't yet, by the way, but it really, people feel appreciated that they've been asked.
Yeah.
And more times than not, you get yeses than no's.
You know what? It is a validation. I mean, I think we think that maybe people are walking around thinking very highly of themselves. And I think a lot of people would never think that they're worthy of being asked or to join something. And so you're really validating it, I think, for people. And obviously, if they were asked all the time, they would probably start to turn things down. But most people aren't asked enough. And we don't ask enough, really. I mean, I think, right?
I think that's fair.
Yeah. So I think that's a good point to make, which is ask people. We even say for leaders, just get better at asking your people to do things, or else you'll end up doing them all. But the other thing that's revealed to us, and I'm not sure you're familiar with this book because it only just came out. It's not really a new concept, but the book by Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy was called Who, Not How. And so whenever you're stuck on something like, how am I going to get this done? Usually it's because you're trying to figure out how you're going to do it. And if you flip it to who could I get to do this? Who could I invite to be part of this? That's actually what propels things forward. And I would say that even today, even though I know the concept of who, not how, even though we've built a tremendous team around us, it's still the thing that bogs me down when I'm thinking about new projects. It's just like, I'm trying to figure it out. And the reality is someone else can actually help me figure it out and even take it on and make it way better than I would have.
Yeah.
So
what I have found in this role of the who, not how concept is not just how to delegate, but I think the most important piece of delegation is accountability.
Yeah.
So it isn't saying to somebody, here, can you do this project? But you support what they're trying to do, but you give them timelines. Say, if you've got issues, come back to me. But otherwise, and you get a mutually agreed upon time as to when it's going to be done.
Which is funny because, lately I've definitely been sort of taking it like most things are made up. Deadlines are made up, and I mean, sometimes they're triggered by other things that have to be done in a certain time to make them happen. But deadlines are still important because people work better to deadlines. But on the flip side, all of those things are usually made up by somebody. All policies are made up. All laws are made up. Even the concept of countries was made up, right? It's just that we codified them, but just think of it that we codify things, employee policy manuals and things, but those are all just made up. Some of them are codified into legislation. But notwithstanding all that, the reality is if you ask somebody to do something and you give them a deadline, a time, date, action, you're probably going to have a better outcome, even though, again, it's somewhat arbitrary what these deadlines are, except that people are counting on somebody to do something.
Always.
Yeah. So let's actually advance a little bit in your... Well, I was curious, sort of pulling back to universal principles, because you led a large regional insurance brokerage. You've been successful at running things. You've been elected to lead many groups. What was it like to be in the federal government? Because I mean, you've been in the party apparatus, kind of around the various riding associations. I'm just wondering, what was it like to actually be in the government? Can you walk us through your early days of what was that whole process once you win the election, which is awesome? Now you're moving to Ottawa. I remember when I knew you, you had to have an apartment in Ottawa.
That's right.
And Judith, of course, probably spent some time with you there and sometimes not, and you're traveling back and forth. Just give us a feel for what it was like to be in the government as a member of parliament.
It'll sound trite if I say a really great privilege, but it truly was. Yeah. Because it is, if you do this the right way, and most politicals, certainly the ones that I came into contact with, not just came into politics with thoughtful and positive serving intentions, but were consistent with that. Yeah. Sometimes you hear the knock that, people are in it for their own reasons. Yeah. That wasn't my experience in politics.
Let's say this. That's going to be true for almost anything anybody does.
I suppose.
Is you're serving and you're getting some benefit. Even, I'm sure, being a community-minded person, and I'm not saying you got something out of it like reputationally, although that would be true, or might have helped in business. The reality is that you're getting something. It could be a good feeling. It could be pride. It could be
and how about just helping people that in your own community,
Yeah.
because you now have another level of influence that you can positively impact.
And you were already an influencer. By the way, before you go a little deeper into the privilege of serving, and that most people have their heart in the right place, certainly at the beginning of it, and sometimes all the way through, is what was it like just being onboarded as an MP? Because they must have a program that they almost have to put you through to learn all the various rules and where everything is. And I'm thinking like a new employee gets hired in a company, they go through a couple of days of orientation, told where the bathroom is and lunchrooms and the breaks. Yeah. What's that like for an MP? Is there a similar process where they have to educate you on what's going to happen and when it's going to happen and the decorum of it even and the procedures?
Well, all the above.
Yeah.
Sounds like you were elected once before.
No.
So when you first go up to Ottawa, and it was kind of sad because I just lost my sister. I called her the day after the election, and she passed away under absolutely tragic circumstances.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
And so I was supposed to go up to Ottawa within 10 days, 2 weeks. You have to get sworn in and do all of that. But we had my sister's funeral in Havelock, Ontario, and so that was actually about halfway. Yeah. So Judith and I went to the funeral, and I spoke for my sister. And then when that was done, we took her ashes back to London. But I had to ask the fellow, the funeral director, if he'd hold the ashes so that on my way back from Ottawa, I could pick them up and take them back to London. So went up to Ottawa. And what happens is that first thing you got to do is there's a lot of things you got to do. I mean, you got to get sworn in, but that hadn't happened yet. And
you have to hire staff and get an office
all of
and
that.
Everything, right?
And that became a big deal because I knew like from nothing on this. Yeah. So I went to the whip's assistant, the party whip, and
the whip is the person who kind of gets everybody in line to do whatever needs to be done, right? Including getting in line.
Actually,
on
as much as anything, to be a resource too.
Okay.
There, it's kind of a dual role, if you will. Although
whip sounds very punitive as a word, but
well, he actually had he was whipped a couple of times. He had whips actually framed in his office.
Yeah. There is a part of getting people in line. Or dealing with, dissent, I suppose. Yeah.
So this was Jay Hill, and he was pretty good. But he directed me to his main support person, and I said, "Look, who do I hire?
Yeah.
Because I'm like learning all over again."
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, here," and there was like 500 resumes.
Yeah.
And I said, "I've been in business a while, and I'm sure every one of those resumes will sound really, really good."
Yeah.
What I'm hoping to get is like the very best of the best.
Right.
She said, "You mean that?" And I said, "I really do, because that comes typically with a little higher expense for your office budget." So she said, "Oh, you mean these?" And she goes to her bottom drawers and pulls out 5.
Yeah.
So I take the 5.
Great question, by the way.
Well, it was the critical question, because you really
you
needed
also were
somebody.
saying, I don't want to comb through 500 resumes anyway, because it's going to be really hard to choose. So
well, not only that, but some were conservatives, and I was elected conservative.
Yeah.
Some were working for the other parties who got defeated and wanted to swing to the other side and say, I wasn't really a liberal, I wasn't really a whatever.
Yeah.
And so I took the resumes and I went to 3 different people. One was, so we've got a queen of conservative politics in London region, Betty Crockett, and she said, when you get to Ottawa, you got to speak to.
She makes good cake mixes, I hear as well. I'm just kidding. Betty Crockett. That's good. Sorry, that's a cheap joke. That's a bad dad joke. But anyway, so she's
that
actually,
was really bad actually.
So she's actually the a key person in
conservative politics, and so she said, Ed, when you get to Ottawa, you got to look up my granddaughter, who actually worked in the whip's office in a different role, and. A dear friend of mine, Dave Nash, said, you got to speak to one of these gentlemen, and gave me his name. I think it was Dave Penner or John Penner. It was one of the Penner boys. And so I had these 5 resumes. Yeah. And I said to Betty's granddaughter, I said, who would you pick? And she said, what I'd like to do is rank them 1 to 5, from best to least, but they're all pretty good. Yeah. And so she did. And she said, you really need, my assistant here is really connected well, knows all these players. Why don't you ask her? So there was my second opinion. Went to one of the Penner boys, asked him, and they all ranked them differently, except the very first one, number one. They all ranked the same person. So I called her up, and I said, Donna, you do not, LaRose, Donna, you don't know me, but my name's Ed Holder. I've just elected, she said, in London West, and you had a reasonable margin, and I'll bet you're looking for an assistant. And I said, well, I'm speaking with you because, and I probably, if you're negotiating
you don't tell them that you're the top choice.
And I did, though. And I said, that's what, and because, you don't want to play to their ego, but, I'm naive in terms of how the political stuff works. And I said, and I think I really need you. So she said, well, tomorrow I've got an appointment for a potential job at 11, and I've got one at 3. Why don't I see you at 9? I said, why don't I see you at 5?
At the end of the day.
Because
interesting strategy.
She'll know who she's met with. And at the end of it, I met her, and she was so clever. And she, I said, what's going to take to bring you on board? Let's reverse role play here. You're Ed Holder, and I'm Donna. And here are the questions that I'm going to ask you. And I just want you to be candid. I really appreciated her honesty. And she said, it's worth this much, but, I'll take this, and I'm happy with that, and over time we'll see what we can do. Hire her, and then she said, you need Terrence. I said, what's a Terrence? She said, he worked with me with our last cabinet minister, and if you want to be a cabinet minister, ever, then she said, you need Terrence, because he knows where all the bones are buried in Ottawa. So I met with Terrence, brought him in, and I'll tell you, and she said, and you need an office. And she just, from
she knew how to
A
do
to
it.
Z, she had all the experience.
It goes back to who, not how again. It's like you get the right person, and the fact that you went for the best. And although there would have been a little bit of party affiliation, obviously, but that was sort of like a prerequisite sort of thing anyway. But you got the best person. So help me understand the difference, because I still want to get to your local politics, which I think is also an interesting
It's taking a while,
thing.
isn't it?
That's okay. I find it fascinating, so I'm hoping our audience does as well. But talk about the difference between being an MP and then eventually being a cabinet minister. What's the big difference, aside from maybe having a car to bring you to Capitol Hill or to Parliament? What's the significant difference when you're a minister?
Well, firstly, you're always an MP.
But that's true. You're always an MP.
That never changes, which means you still have community commitments.
Right. So if anything, you get busier because you have to do both. Yeah.
So it went from a 24-hour day to insane.
Yeah.
But again, great staff.
Yeah.
So the advantage I had when I became a minister is that I inherited my predecessor's political staff. Yeah. And that
must be just a fascinating thing as a staff member, but something they're used to is just the changing of the person at the top. Otherwise, the operations essentially are run by a team, right?
Well, it's two parts. There's the political team, and then there is the ministry team. Yeah. And the two have to work hand in hand.
Because a ministry is like a business unto itself. I mean, it has things that it has to look after and is responsible for. And then the political side, I mean, that's when I watch television, which is as close to politics as I really get, it is this interesting dance between the political side and the operations side, essentially.
As long as you recognize that the role of the political side is to make policy, and we had a tremendous deputy minister and a strong team that worked with him. And their job primarily is to implement policy, not to make it, to implement it. Yeah. So we set the direction, they do the implementation. And as long as that's clear, and I remember the very first decision I had to make, and I think I was in the role 10 days. And it was about a $11 or $12 million decision for some application. I didn't know my foot from my elbow on this stuff. So I brought in I had great policy people and communications people and my chief. Brought them all in. So say 5 people in the room, plus me. And I was reviewing this, and they wanted my okay or not. So I asked each one of them individually what they thought about the application and why. And they all supported it, and they gave me their reference as to why. So I said, I'm prepared to accept that because I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
But it'll get tougher because I'll ask better questions as we go forward. And I did, and they were supportive.
Okay. Well,
So-
they probably appreciated that you basically went with their endorsement.
Well, everybody loves
Yeah,
to
of course.
get supported on that. But, what did I know in that particular experience? So it was interesting when I became a minister. I get a call. I'm supporting, one of my charities with Wayne Dunn, we did Sunshine Dreams for Kids. Yeah. We created a $1 million+ annuity. We just finished Y for Kids, which was a $1 million+ annuity or endowment, both of them. Yeah. And I was thanking my volunteers in my home, and I get a call from the Deputy Chief of Staff, a Londoner. And she called up from Ottawa, and she said, Ed.
Deputy Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister?
Exactly.
Okay.
So
someone from the PMO, Prime Minister's office, okay.
Yep. So I get a call from PMO.
Yeah.
And she said, Ed, look, I'm going away, but I wouldn't mind you coming up to Ottawa. I want to talk to you about a few things that are going on. And this was our recess week, so we were doing constituency work and other things at home. And I said, well, great, I can get there in a few days. She said, terrific. She calls me, and I said, but why? I mean, I was then caucus chair for Southwest Ontario. I said, am I not doing a good job? And she said, no, I just need to clear up a few things with you. And I said, great. She calls me up 15 minutes later and said, Ed, there's a plane tomorrow morning from London. Can you take it? I said, wow.
There's a sense of urgency there.
Did I muck up real badly?
Yeah.
And so she said, no, just please. I just need to get this off my plate.
She can't tell you, but you
She
have to
can't.
go. Yeah.
So I fly up the next morning, and and Joanne said, would you care for a coffee? And I said, sure. I never saw the coffee. Chief of Staff comes in and said, Ed, do you have a few minutes? The Prime Minister would like to talk to you.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, I'm here anyway. Ray, why not?
By the way, was it unusual to get FaceTime with the Prime Minister, especially like one-on-one? Or
it wasn't hard to, even as a backbencher.
Okay.
He was pretty easy to connect to and meet. So I knew him reasonably. And I'm older than the Prime Minister. So, but then at that point, I thought, At first, when they talked to me about coming to Ottawa, I thought they wanted me to chair a committee, which is a super big deal.
Yeah.
Then when the chief said, can you have time for the Prime Minister, which is kind of an odd request, I thought, he wants to make me a parliamentary secretary, which supports the ministers. Yeah. Then I get in there, and so a few minutes later, right on time, I'm there, and the PM's leaning against the doorway, and he said, well, hi, Ed, isn't this your lucky day? And I said, I don't know, PM, I've had a lot of lucky days. How lucky am I? And he said, you better sit down. And then he asked me if I'd be Minister of Science and Technology. Okay. And after about 3 wows, because I certainly was not expecting it, he said, okay, enough of the wows. He said, you're doing it. I said, that's not a question. Because you don't say, oh, I wished I had another portfolio.
Right.
But what was interesting at the time, he said, now you might have thought that this, with your background, should be more business-oriented, because don't forget I have a philosophy degree. Yeah. But he said, you'll be shocked as to how business-focused it is. And when you think of technology,
when
research development, and my first task was to complete the 5-year technology and innovation plan for Canada.
Yeah.
5-year plan.
Yeah, just a small thing.
So that was a little bit of drinking from the fire hose. Yeah. But again, the advantage I had was you get to meet I went to every university and college across the country. I went to every business incubator across the country. Mm-hmm. Probably met more billionaires in 3 months than you can ever imagine, or that I could ever imagine. Yeah. And so those are all in my network of people I've met along the way, and that's all part of it.
Well, I do want to jump to, even though there's a lot we could still talk about at the federal level. What made you want to be the mayor of London? So, for those who don't know, the City of London, Ontario, in Canada has around 400,000 population. So it's a mid-sized city. I think in Canada it would have been ranked as the 10th or 12th largest.
10th largest city in Canada.
10th largest city in Canada. So people know the big cities like Vancouver and Toronto and Montreal. But London is a top 10 city in Canada. So it's not a small city to run, and it's professionally run. So, what was your thinking behind it? And because there's really not parties for the city council, yeah, just walk us through a little bit of that.
So the why. So 2015, the good people in London West felt I'd worked so hard that I deserved a rest. So I lost the election. So
this is making lemonade again. No, lemons, okay.
And so I was doing some consulting. Not sure I was very good at it, because if you do the consulting stuff, there's two things you got to learn. You got to acquire new clients. You got to renew them or find new ones. It's just like
welcome to my world.
You know, exactly.
Yeah.
And I wasn't done yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 2015, I thought I had another election in me. Well, the opportunity for mayor came up, and look, we had some credible candidates.
And remind me, so who was the mayor just prior to you?
Matt Brown.
Matt Brown, okay. So and Matt wasn't running again, is that right?
That's right, he stepped away.
So you had in politics a lot is what you've done in the community, how known are you, the positive impressions there are. So I remember going to one of your campaign rallies, I think at the time, and it was in what used to be a Sears store.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, right? And it was a big deal. I was impressed with how it was run. And so you won handily, I think, right?
Well, it was the first time they ever had a ranked ballot.
Oh, right. It was ranked ballot, yeah.
Which they got rid of immediately after I was elected.
It was a one-time only in the city of London, so far anyway.
I remember going to the Premier at the request of council and saying, you know what, don't get rid of this. People are just getting used to it. Yeah. And he said, you can't be, we were the only municipality in the province that had a ranked ballot.
This is like when the U.S. and Canada said, we're going to go metric, right? And everyone said, yeah, we're going to do it. And then the U.S. said, no, we're changing our mind.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the city of London did ranked balloting first in the province of Ontario, right? Yeah.
That's right. So based on it, I led, interestingly though, on this ranked ballot, every councillor who won, including the mayor, was leading on that first ballot. Mm-hmm. So whether it had been first past the post, which has been the tradition, everybody would have been.
But it also helped have the second place choices of people who didn't choose you 100% first, probably, right? Yeah.
So when the final vote was counted, and I think we had 10 candidates, but you needed a pure majority, and I think at the end of it I got 60 some odd %. Yeah. But you know, enough people come off the ballot, and you're going to get up there. But it certainly wasn't 60% on the first round.
It certainly looked like you. I mean, I'm sure, although you've been involved in losing efforts as well for elections, but it certainly looked like you'd be a very strong candidate, and that's why I thought anyway. So, and you did a great job, I think, as mayor. I'm a citizen of the City of London. But it strikes me that compared to federal politics, I mean, there's like weekly council meetings, and there's so many things that the mayor, I'm sure, gets invited to do, but also has to do, and sitting on committees. I mean, that must have even been almost more work than being an MP, was it, or no?
But, well, I would say to you, they were both fairly intense. Yeah. But there's a different commitment in municipal politics because you're always home.
Okay, and that's nice. It's like playing for the home team.
Well,
only home games.
Kind of yes and no, but even now my wife doesn't like to send me out for bread and milk because it takes a while.
Does she think you might get elected again? Is that why?
Oh, no. She just knows I'll get waylaid a little bit.
Okay, because you'll be talking to people.
And people still recognize you.
For sure.
But imagine that time, though. So
I saw you on TV at a different community event. Shows you're still out there. And actually, you ran into somebody who we both... Oh, it was my mother, actually. My mother was at an event, and you were there, and you were very nice with her. And so that's again, why I reached back out to you since... I also say that...
Because your mom thinks I'm okay. That's good.
Right. If you pass my mom's test, it's good. But the one thing is that Ed has always been really good. I know I'm one of... like many people that you stay in touch with, but even just to get the odd email from you just saying, hey, just reaching out and saying hi, because I'm not naturally inclined to do that. So it's just, again, you do it. A friend of mine also does it. A good friend of mine is the one who will pick up the phone if it's been a while. Just continue to build the network.
Good for them.
But are there any...
Not to build the network, to keep relationships up.
To nurture it, to nurture the relationships. Yeah. So anything else that you'd comment on of the stresses and strains in as being mayor? I mean, you're home, but you've got a lot on your plate.
I think anybody in politics at whatever level, if they're being totally candid, their spouse, their partner would say, I'm a political widow. Yeah. That's what my wife would say, because you're out all the time. Yeah. And my amazing wife would also say, with today being her birthday, by the way.
Happy birthday to Judy. Oh, even though this will play after your birthday, just remember we were thinking about you.
That's good. And she would say, I wasn't the one elected. I didn't have my name on the ballot. People don't want to see me. Yeah. Not that they would mind seeing her. By the way, she's
impressive on her own right.
Totally in her own right. Much more than me, if I can tell you the truth. But the thing is that that wasn't her thing.
Yeah.
She had, look, we did a lot of things, and we did as much together and still do, even probably more together now. This afternoon, we're rededicating the Rotary Reading Garden in London, and
major project of our Rotary Club that we were in.
And Judith's coming out to that, which I'm delighted by.
Yeah.
So the toughest part in all of politics is hanging out on your own. Mm-hmm. It can be terribly lonely, or you just don't have the support networks that you otherwise would. In London, and municipal politics is somewhat different, but with all the constant requirements that you have of attending things, being expected to attend.
Well, even needing to attend too. Like it's expecting, but you want to be there when there's major announcements for the community too, right? Because that's the part that always, maybe I could get your insights on this, because a lot of things go in the works for quite some time before they eventually get approved and announced, and then there's usually that news conference when there's a ribbon cutting and all that, which is the ceremonial part. And I noticed that the politicians definitely, I mean, they need to be visible and present there. But it's really the culmination of so much work that happened by so many people leading
100%.
Up to that, and maybe even predecessors in office in some cases
100%.
Because of the timeline, right?
Yep.
Is there anything that you'd comment on that as far as like what it was like to do the ceremonial parts, which were important to the community, but sort of almost like the icing on a cake that was baked a long time ago? I don't know.
Well, there's two parts. Firstly, when people say you stand on the shoulders of giants, it really is true. So the work that we did, if it was our initiative, that's one thing, and you always want to see that through to completion, and for greater good.
Yeah.
If it's somebody else's, you have to give them credit. You know, it's interesting when I always thought it was important when I would make announcements as mayor. If there was a counselor in the room, I would bring them up on stage.
Yeah.
And so here I was at the Korean Liberation Day just even a few weeks ago here in London at Wonderland Gardens. And I'm there because of my involvement with the Byron Springbank Veterans Monument, and we have members of the Korean community very active in it and very grateful to Canada for its role in the Korean War. So I'm at this event. The deputy mayor is there. We're sitting side by each in the front row, and they're calling up people to express their greetings and what have you. And I wasn't on the agenda, nor needed to be. I didn't have that role. Yeah. But the deputy mayor said to me, he said, you know, every time you were at an event, you always invited us with you. Would you come up with me today?
Wow.
And I said, but I have no role. He said, you will. So I went up with him out of respect to the request. Yeah. And sure enough, he speaks, and Sean Lewis is very eloquent.
Yeah.
And then he comes back and said, now I'd like to ask our former mayor to acknowledge the event.
Wow.
So there was a microphone, a committed crowd.
There was a microphone, and you're not one who would not know what to say at that point.
It actually felt fairly comfortable, even though I hadn't done it in a while. Yeah. But we promoted. I used it as an opportunity to promote the Veterans Monument that we're building. So, but to answer your question about, it's not a dual life when you're doing the political things, but you're doing the events. You're seeing things fulfilled, and some you're leaving to the next team. Yeah. But our backdrop that we had, and you'll recall, when I was mayor, was COVID swept through Canada and the world, and London was no exception. Yeah. And some of the decisions you had to make then, I recall the then medical officer of health said, Ed, you know, if would you initiate a bylaw that asked people for mandatory masking and spacing and all the rest? Yeah. And I said, no, I don't think I will. However, if you as medical officer of health, who has the medical background, uses your powers to initiate it. I will have counsel. I can't commit counsel because I'm one vote of 15. But I said I will encourage counsel to support it, and it was unanimous.
Yeah.
So we did it that way, and that was the right order. The second thing we dealt with that was really challenging was the tragic murders of the Afzaal family.
Oh, right, yeah.
And
very big story in London. And still very memorable to this day. So.
And 3 generations of Londoners whose only act was to take a walk after dinner, and some crazy decided it was to mow them down.
Yeah.
But what was important about that, and it ties into COVID as well, as we talked a lot about COVID, we talked a lot to the family, and we had a lot of politicals down from all the various parties, provincially and federally. And when I spoke at the mosque when we honored that family, I said, just look side by each. We're all Londoners together. Yeah. Look at the 10,000 people that are here today.
It was amazing how it brought everyone together because people know what's right and what's not right.
Yeah.
It definitely was not right.
And we had a big march the following Friday organized by Kevin George, who's the dean at then St. Aidan's, now at St. Paul's. Yeah. And we had 15,000 people there, hand in hand, arm in arm. And we marched because we said, this is not our London.
Right.
So when you deal with those 2 kinds of things along with everything else you deal with, I was struck by how Londoners came together as one. Yeah. And there were sacrifices. Oh, my God, during COVID, when a business would go down because they couldn't operate their business properly, I'm a small business guy. Yeah. And we have small businesses in our family mix. Yeah. And I got to tell you, that was so hurtful. Yeah. And I felt for those families. I truly did. Yeah. So we got through it. Yeah. And for those that didn't, my heart still goes to them if they didn't survive their businesses, because it was tough times.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what an honor to be there. And sometimes it isn't that you that make the role. Mm-hmm. I think it's the circumstance and the position that makes it.
Yeah, it's always that and how you rise to it. At that time, how bad is this that I was forgetting about COVID a bit, except I was elected the president of the National Speakers Association for Canada, the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. So we had our big convention in London at the Convention Centre. I was brought on, I was going to be the president in 2020. The year, of course, starts very, optimistically. And then of course, the wheels fall off on so many bases, and I'm not even talking about the people that had died from it and had significant health consequences. But you can imagine business, as you know, shut down. Speakers weren't going to events because there weren't events.
Yep.
And as the president, what I had to do is just to realize to tell people that just hang in there. Right, hang in there, and actually, for many of the speakers, it actually became an interesting pivot point. Right, and our studio that's running right now is also doing that. So, what I want to do is, of course, we've had such a great conversation over our 2 episodes, and acknowledge that Ed Holder is still in the consulting business. He's really advocating for and connecting people business-wise to what's happening in London. Still very active in the community with the various things that you're still part of. Which shows you it's not just like when your job was to be there. It's always been about your heart being there. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that. Thank you for your service. I'm hoping that our listeners and viewers also acknowledge that Ed, by sharing his journey, both the personal tragedies and losses and even his early days in episode 1, really just show you what's possible when you kind of go down the pathway of saying yes to things, making the best of them, even when they don't work out. Something usually is gained. It becomes part of your leadership tapestry, your human tapestry. So Ed, thank you for being our guest on the podcast. And if there's anything that we can do with your organization to help you on your journey of leadership, whether it's frontline leadership training for your supervisors or your site leaders or plant managers through our new Plant Manager Excellence program, reach out to us on our website at uniquedevelopment.com. For now, all the best in making your leadership tapestry.